record there, right? All right. So we are looking at the sources of laws today, and what this slide says is that there are two sources of law. You have one source is the state, right? The state, the word statute comes from the word state. So a source of law is the state. And you typically would find that, for example, in the laws that are being made in Parliament, you also have regulations. Like if you look at the ministry's briefing for the coronavirus, you'll hear them say that our regulations will be signed in on Monday, right? And that is Minister Terence D.L. Singh. Once you see the ministers involved in it, right, that is really called state-made law or law that could be classed as statute law. So in short, all the laws of the land, right, the Road Traffic Act, right, all of the regulations coming out of this new demerit point system, all of that is classed as state-made law. And state-made law is known as statute law. Now, the need for mentioning that in this course is because the health and safety law, right, the law we saw last week, the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974, as well as the USH Act that we have in Trinidad and Tobago, is statute law. It is the law of the land, right? So that's the first one. And the other one we see is common law. Common law, though, it's a type of law, but it's the type of law that is not made in Parliament. It's not made by the ministers, right? So the question is, where is this law made? The thing is, this law is made in the courts, right? If you have a matter, let's say a civil matter against someone, and there's a judge hearing the matter, the judgment of the judge is as good as law then, right? So you find common law is typically found in cases of disputes between two persons, like between an employer and employee, perhaps between a neighbor and another neighbor, right? And of course, the range goes into anything that is basically personal, right? If you have two persons, maybe a landlord and a tenant, there was some disagreement, and you go before a judge, whatever the judge say or the judgment given by that judge is a type of law, right? For example, if it was some case in which somebody was probably owing for like an installment for rent or a car, whatever have you, and it is in such a way that the judge says that the tenant has to pay the rent, but that verdict is the law. That type of law, of course, is not made in Parliament. It's not a Parliament channel there. It is more or less like Judge Judy. Like, I guess those of us have seen the episodes of Judge Judy anyway. Whatever the judge say is as good as law. So if they say pay the rent or you have to vacate the premises, that judgment is what we call common law. That's what Metana Marcus there now, right? Think you okay with that a bit? So there are two types of laws in the world. And again, the need for mentioning this is that both types apply to health and safety. We have the USH Act in Trinidad and Tobago, as well as the HSW Act in the UK, and that could be classed as statute law. It's the law of the land. You also have in Trinidad and Tobago and around the world, if an employee was, let's say, victimized, if an employee was fired, right? If an employee was wrongfully treated and the person wants to take up a civil matter, they can go to the industrial court, in which case that verdict by the industrial court judge will be classed as a common law judgment, in which the employee may receive compensation coming out of that civil case matter, right? So there are two types of laws governing health and safety. And again, there are really two types of laws governing the world and not just health and safety, right? You have the law that is made by the government, the law that is made in Parliament, and then the law that is heard in common matters or civil matters between two individuals or so, right? So I'll go to the next slide. If you have any questions, please ask. I just want to find the next slide there. Right, so a lot of this is on the slide itself. So I can get this one to go. Right, so statute law deals with law made by the state as I said before, the word statute came on from the word state. It is defined as the written law of the land. It could be in the forms of acts or regulations. Like I said, you listen to the ministry briefing, you hear them say, there's a regulation coming from Monday that hardwares will be, open till 5 o'clock, stuff like that anyway, right? And it's normally written in by the ministers, right? So if it is matters of health, it will be the Minister of Health. If it's matters of health and safety, it will be the Minister of Labor here in Trinidad and Tobago. So they can have the act as well as regulations can be made from, I want to say from day to day, but regulations are really made or written in by the different ministers on a regular basis or as the needs may be anyway, right? An act is known as a statute. A regulation is known as a statutory instrument. If you are in such a matter with the state, they say the prosecution, which will be the state, by the way, must prove the case against the employer beyond all reasonable doubt. You are a criminal if you commit a crime against the state. That's how it is, right? So once you break the law of the land, once you break the law of the land, you are seen as a criminal, right? It doesn't have to be, like I said, like a heinous crime. Once you break the law of the land, you commit a crime, right? And in that case, you are seen as a criminal once you break the law of the land, right? So even for health and safety, those things we saw last week then, those things we saw, if the employer is to break or wants to break those requirements, they are breaking the law of the land, and in that case, they seem to commit. And Tobago for employers as well as employees. The fine for employers in Trinidad and Tobago is 10,000 TT. Those nice lines we read last week, and I don't want to go back to the slides. The duty of the employer that had in it provide safe access egress, provide safe plant and equipment, information, training, instruction, supervision. If that is not provided, there is a fine in Trinidad and Tobago. And we have been working with companies. One of the things we do on the side is like consultancy. We have actually done quite a number, well, 2 for this year already, given this slow pace of this year, but about 2 for the year in companies that would have been fined by OSHA itself, right? And what you need to know is one of the lines is what would attract the fine. So if a company breaches more than one of what you saw on the slide, the fines can be way much more than 10,000 TT. For instance, if a company was to breach the part that said provide information, training, instruction, and supervision, that in itself is 10,000 TT. If the company also did not provide safe access and egress, that's another 10,000 TT. So you have cases where companies can be fined way above 50,000 TT for a breach of the OSH Act anyway. So once you commit the crime, there is like a penalty to pay. The penalty involves imprisonment and fines. In Trinidad and Tobago, though we don't have much imprisonment, this I think is a shortcoming in the OSH Act in that there hasn't been any. In fact, there's been 0 employers, managers, directors imprisoned because of health and safety violations, but the fines are quite forthcoming anyway, right? And I could call the names of the companies, but I wouldn't do that, right? Once we recorded this session anyway. But a lot of companies that you all go to, a lot of companies that you may be familiar with have been fined, for health and safety violations, right? The charges, they say, can be indictable or summary offenses. And these 2 words, what they mean, it reflects a degree of seriousness. So an indictable offense is a more serious offense. An indictable health and safety offense then is like maybe the company did not provide safe plants and equipment, and an employee, let's say they did not provide a harness, and the employee fell and died, right? So it is like a death then. It's a serious offense. In that case, they say the employers can be charged indictably, right? Meaning that it is a serious offense, and as so serious as it could be debt. A summary offense is a less serious offense. Summary offense could just be a slip, trip, and fall, right? Where the company maybe did not provide safe plant, maybe it had cords and whatever have you around the company, someone fell. OSHA came in and they investigated and they have decided to charge the company. And again, these are maybe the 10,000 TT fines that I was talking about anyway, right? The burden of proof is placed on the employer. What that means, the employer has to defend himself and is going to be defending himself against the state. It will be the state prosecuting the company. Why the state? Because the law is from the state, right? Statute law. So it's the state against the employer, and the employer will have to say, you know, well, they would have done X, Y, Z to prevent the accident. And of course, that's how that goes anyway, you know, with that particular charge. Statute law does not involve compensation for the injured party. To get the compensation, the injured employee, or if the employee was injured, would have to go to common law courts, for example, the magistrate's court. The employee will have to get a lawyer and then take legal action to sue the employer, but it wouldn't happen just like that. For compensation, we have to get to the other slide, which is that the employee will have to take it upon themselves, get a lawyer, and take action against the company, right? So if you understand this here, so there's two things happening here. There is the law of the land. If a company would have broken a requirement in the HSW Act, so what we have in Trinidad is called the OSH Act anyway, the state, the OSH inspectors can come by, and this is what you see here, that those OSH inspectors can issue like a fine to the company, in which case the company can either accept the fine, pay the 10,000 TT, or decide to go to court, and then they now have to prove, the burden of proof is on the employer to prove that they did not deserve that fine anyway, right? That is a matter of the company and the state. Again, if there was a person that was injured, the injured party have to go into common law, right? Hire a lawyer and then seek, you know, legal redress, or seek or sue the employer under another type of law, which is called common law and not the law that is made by the state, right? See how complicated this piece could be? Yes. Okay, right. So the good news is that these don't come for much marks at all, right? Statute law, civil law questions are not very common, but you know, it's on the syllabus, so we have to cover it anyway, right? There is a question at the end, and you'll see what it looks like anyway, right? But getting into the content of it, not much of what I said there are really exam type questions anyway, right? All right, so the other slide I have here, statute law, acts of parliament. So a law is regarded as primary legislation. They go through a three-stage approach for it to become law. This is the same in parliament in Trinidad and Tobago here. If they want to, you know, come up with a law, they normally have to come up with something called a consultation document, right? A whole set of research goes behind that though, coming up with a consultation document. After the consultation phase, a bill is produced. The bill is normally read 3 times in Parliament as its contents may need changing. This is a lengthy process, about 3 months anyway, and if the bill gets through, it is signed by the head of state. So in Trinidad and Tobago, that will be our president. And in the UK, it will be the Queen. Once it's signed by the Queen in the UK or by the president in Trinidad and Tobago, we use the same term. They say it has received royal assent, and after which time now, once the signature goes on that bill, it becomes an act of parliament. So that's how they would have written the OSH Act and any other law that you may be familiar with, the Road Traffic Act, etc. Right? That's how they get started, right? Not too sure what's going on with my slides, right? So state-made law, statute law. So we have here regulations, as I said on the slide before, that statute law could be an act or it can be a regulation. If I go back to that slide, you'll see it here. statute law, right, can be acts or regulations. So we just spoke about the act. This slide there was the act and how the act can become an act in the first place, starting off with a consultation document, bill being produced, the bill being read 3 times, and then having been signed by the head of state in the respective countries. So another type of statute law would be called regulations. These are made by the Secretary of State. Now, the Secretary of State is a term they use in America as well as in England. We don't use that phrase in Trinidad and Tobago. We say the Minister of, right? So regulations then could be made by the Minister of Health, right? Regulations could be made by the Minister of Labor, right? As a result of HSC proposal, and this was something in the UK, HSC, so find that the HSE it is actually a agency in Duke Street, Port of Spain. The HSC is actually a big, high rise anyway in London, right? So that is where you find the ministers. That's how we have like the ministers in Trinidad and Tobago. They would be in the Red House, or at I'm gonna say the Red House, but of course you know that they're done by the Hyatt side anyway now, right? So Parliament is down there. So this is where you find these ministers and them. So it's actually a building. The HSE is actually a building, a government building that you'll find the ministers, more or less spending their days anyways. Health and safety as a party, the Secretary of State can be on their own, and it's made under the HSW Act 1974. So if it gets confusing, it just think of what you see when you look at the ministry briefing, right? The ministry daily briefing anyway. You'd see the Prime Minister, directing the Minister of Health, Mr. Terence Dial, saying to do X, Y, and Z. And then you hear them say that they're going to write this into regulations from Monday, right? So they may have a briefing on Saturday, but then he, the Prime Minister will off in Trinidad, Minister of Health, Prime Minister will to write this for just making this up from the weeks that went by anyway, right? But the point is that the minister will not write it in, and when the minister writes this particular document, it is law, right? That what he's writing is called the regulation, but the Minister of Health or the Minister of Labor, it's law. It's good as it says, statute can be an act in Parliament, right? The different ministers or the different ministries they have in the UK, or we have in Trinidad as well anyway. Right, I think, did you all have a view of the last video on YouTube? Anyone?
No.
Okay, now remember, remember we do try to post them up. So this is one I think you'll want to hear another time. This is one you'll want to hear over and over again because it's a little bit complicated if you're not too familiar with the laws. The only good news you have here is that these things don't come for a lot of marks anyway, right? Sometimes they don't come at all. It's on the syllabus. We are looking at health and safety laws, so we have to cover it anyway. But there is no big set of marks then available for this. You may simply get 2 marks, 4 marks for talking about, laws and regulations. And when this question comes, I didn't want to jump into it as yet, but I might as well tell her, like when this question comes, it can simply come as what is the difference between statute law and common law. And we kind of covered one already. Now, if you read down the slides, I don't know how much time we'll have today. I actually have a table on it. So if you read, I guess I went to the end, but just around the slide itself, I'm trying to find it here. There's a table that have it pretty well. The differences between statute law and common law. I'm not seeing it there as yet. I know it's somewhere to the end. So that is like what would normally come, and we kind of covered that difference already. I mean, like a really good difference is that statute law is made in Parliament, common law is made by a judge, right? That's one main thing we said. We also said that statute law, if you break the law of the land, you are seen as a criminal, and there's a fine or an imprisonment attached. So that's not the same for common law. If you sue someone, no one is going to jail. All that's going to happen if you sue someone, if you win your case, you would receive compensation. So it's things like that, right? If you read through all these slides, they normally will ask for 4 differences. So that's 2 there already. And we kind of now start the lesson anyway, right? So as the weeks go by, you probably will get into all of them. We could read a little bit more of the differences. Right, let me just take a pause here. See if you have any questions there. So I kind of shouted out like a question as to how this may come, the differences between the law that's made by the government, the law that's made in parliament, to the law that is made by a judge, right? The difference between statute law as well as common law, right?
Does a magistrate count as well? Or just a judge?
In what sense?
Well, making a law, common law.
Yes.
If any magistrate's court?
Yeah, if you sue someone and you go to the magistrate's court, the thing about the magistrate's court is that the magistrate's court can hear both types of laws. They can hear a case from the state versus a company, but the magistrate's court could actually hear a case of an employer versus an employee, right? So yes, the magistrate's court would count if your case, you know, comes before a magistrate in the magistrate's court, and you know, it's you versus an employer, that will be counted as common law. What makes it state law, Nathaniel, is that the state is prosecuting the company. The USH inspectors then that represent the government, it's not employer and employee, but it's the government and the company. And in that case, it is state law then. It's a state matter because it's really the state that is prosecuting the company, right? But both matters can be heard in the magistrate's court. We should be aware that we do have an industrial court in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, two of them. You have one in Port of Spain and you have one in San Fernando, to the bottom of Penitence Hill there. I guess just before you go up, you know, to where the promenade is anyway, right? The industrial court is there. And a lot of dispute between employees and employers are heard in that industrial court. That doesn't mean it cannot be heard in Superior's magistrate's court, right? It actually all depends, I suppose, on where the case is actually brought up. Or maybe, you know, sometimes it's referred to the industrial court, sometimes the magistrates deal with it right in their own regions anyway. Yes? So far, so good? Okay, all right. So you're on the quiet side. Okay, all right. This slide we're looking at here, this slide has on it 6 examples. It should be 6. I hope I have it correct, right? It's 6 examples of regulations that they have in the UK, right? So why we have to look at this is because one of the things that's different in Trinidad and Tobago and to the UK is that the UK have more than one law for health and safety, right? We just have the USH Act, and a lot of people have described the USH Act as like a skeleton, right? And people use many phrases. If you're familiar with the culture in Trinidad and Tobago, some people say that the USH Act is a toothless bulldog. It have a lot of bark and no bite. Now, one of the reasons for that is because why people say that is because the USH Act is a general act, right? It's a general act that covers all health and safety, but it's not very specific. So what England has done really well is that they do have specifics. And what you're looking at here is 6 specific, should we say spin-off laws then? And those spin-off laws are called regulations. And if you look at them, you'll see how specific they are. So the first one, the Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations, 1999. Second one, the Provision and Use of Work Equipment Regulation, PUA, 1998. Now we follow all of these in Trinidad, by the way. Eh? So when I say specific, then there's a separate law then in England for work equipment. Whereas you find in Trinidad, there will be a mention of work equipment in paragraphs now, right? But it wouldn't talk about forklifts and cranes and pillar drills. They wouldn't talk about that in the USH Act, right? What is different in the UK, we have specific spin-off laws. Those spin-off laws would look at various elements of health and safety. So these 6 here, they call them the European 6-pack. They are the foundational 6 laws to supplement the HSW Act that they have in the UK, right? Third one, the Workplace Health, Safety and Welfare Regulation. So in addition to their main law, which is the HSW Act, they have a separate law to talk about welfare. in the workplace, right? Display screen equipment regulations 1992. Again, in addition to the main HSW Act, there's a separate law for talking about monitors, process plant operators, right? Persons who probably have to look at a monitor, computer, but even those that can check out counters and stuff, right? Display screen equipment regulations. There's a separate spin-off law for manual handling. There's a separate spin-off law for PPE, right? So what we don't do too well in Trinidad on, you know, the UK would have had, and a lot, not really a lot, but all the companies in Trinidad and Tobago, let's say you want to issue your workers a particular brand of safety glasses. Our OSHA then doesn't have the particular brand of safety glasses. To get the brand, what the companies do, they go to the UK laws, the Atlantic LNG, the MHI plant, right? TUFCO, what they do, they actually go to the UK laws and they look and see, well, what is the standard that they are using away, right? Anyone knows the standard type of safety glasses that should be given to workers?
Ian saying the wrong. Is that Z87?
Very good, Nathaniel, right? So again, yeah, it says Z87. Now, that Z87 is not written in our OSHA, but it's taken from the UK law for personal protective equipment. So you get the idea when I spoke about specifics there a bit? That's a perfect example of specifics, right? I could have done another easier one. Okay, well, if you have facilities, right, how do we know? How do we know, for example, like a worker should be given, when they say wholesome drinking water is not understood to be pipe-borne water. It's taken to be like water from a dispenser. And if water is to be provided from a dispenser, cups have to be provided as well. Now, how do we know that? How do we know in Trinidad that water have to be from a dispenser? And if you provide a dispenser, cups have to be provided as well. That level of specifics then is not written in the OSHA, but we get it from the foreign laws, the Workplace Health, Safety and Welfare Regulations 1992. And that's one example of many. Another one is, you know, like your hand wash station, right? So the specifics of it is that the hand wash must be able to wash up to your elbow, right? Up to your forearm then. So how do we know that? That is not written in the OSHA, but it's written in the Workplace Health, Safety and Welfare Regulations 1992. So I'll say it again. So the UK as well as the US, they have been pretty good in giving specifics. And even though we in Trinidad, we have the health regulations written by, you know, Minister Terence Dialsing, but not a lot has been written for health and safety. So you find companies, they abide by the UK regulations, which is why you find that NEBOSH, even being from a foreign country, has a worldwide appeal, right? I mean, you have countries like Trinidad, you have Grenada have their own health and safety law as well, but even countries that don't have their own health and safety laws, like the Bahamas, like St. Lucia, they still look at the UK to see, you know, like what is the standard in a foreign country, and then they apply those standards in their own country, even though it may not be regulations, or in the case of St. Lucia, it may not even be the law in the country, but they follow what we call like the best practice then that is going on around the world anyway. Right? Think you get those a bit? Right, I am just, any questions there so far? Right, I want to try to finish off now. This class, again, if you check your time, it's going a little bit longer than the half an hour. And there's a reason for that, because I want to finish up what I want to talk about here, right? So we have two more things to look at. So just to recap, we would have looked at statute law. We touched a little bit on common law, but not too much, right? From statute law, we went into regulations, because we said an example of a statute law could be an act, but also an example of a statute law could be a regulation. So we just there finished talking about regulations. Some key points about regulations is that they can be written in. It is a very fast process. Just take an example of what's happening in Trinidad and Tobago. On Saturday, the Prime Minister can tell the Minister of Health to write in a regulation by Monday. It's written faster. It doesn't have to go through Parliament or the long stages of Parliament then. It's written in under the Health and Safety at Work Act, or under the law of the land. right? We also saw 6 examples of regulations. You may want to learn some of these by heart. Really, not for exam, but maybe for your own interest, if you have to make reference back to them, maybe on your day-to-day job, right? So the other one, something called an approved code of practice, symbol is ACOPs for short. So if you listen to the line, they say an ACOP can supplement an act and a regulation. Now, if you just read this over, but did we just say a regulation could supplement the act? But then this line says the ACOP can supplement the act and the regulation. So what you find happening here is that these documents, then when I say documents, these instruments, they seek to clarify one to the other. The regulations attempt to clarify what an act is saying. Right? I don't know if you want to facility now, right? Section 2 of the Act said we need employers should welfare facilities. But if you look at it, so the regulations is trying to clarify what the Act is saying. And in this slide we on now, this slide is saying that yes, even so the regulation is trying to clarify the Act. This other document is also trying, each one is trying to make it a little bit more understandable for you, right? So this is like a booklet that will actually tell you, if you read the second line, it tells you what the law wants, right? It enables the legislation to be kept up to date, as updating the ACOP is much quicker than the act or regulation. But remember, we just said the regulation is a quicker way of updating the act, right? So the regulation is a quick way of updating the act, and the ACOP is also a quicker way of updating the regulation, even to make it simple for everyone to understand. The ACOP are regarded as extensions of the law. HSE has the power to approve the ACOPs, which is in the must consult the Minister of Labor or the Secretary of State there anyway, right? It'll make sense in a bit, right? Failure to comply with the ACOP is not an offense in itself. Failure to observe the ACOP can be used as evidence in criminal provision, providing there is evidence to demonstrate that he ignored all the ways as well, right? So, for those of us who drive a bit, right? I know we all kind of faced with the new traffic management system anyway, but I won't go into that. I just want to give you a simple example. We should know that there is a road traffic act in Trinidad and Tobago, yes? Yeah, everybody?
Yeah.
When you went to learn to drive, right? What did they give you? Like, when you paid your money, you're supposed to get a book. What was the name of the book? I'll give you a clue. It starts with R.
Regulations.
Right? So I'm trying to show you that these things are all related. Now, the regulation, when you open the book, you'd have seen, okay, like how to make a right turn, right? You put your hand out, how to make a left turn, you put your hand out and you make a semicircle. Now, what I'm trying to tell you is that where you found those things was not in the Road Traffic Act, but you found it in the little booklet that went along with the act. You think you see what's happening here? The little booklet now that they give you, the book called Regulations, is attempting to make you understand what the act had in it, the Road Traffic Act. But it couldn't put everything in the Road Traffic Act, like all the diagrams, all the hand turn and all of that, right? They couldn't put everything in the main act because it would have been too bulky, right? So what they did, they created supplemental booklets, which they call regulations. And that's an example of what's happening. A regulation is trying to simplify what the act is saying. And this thing here, this approved code of practice, what I was telling you before, this is actually like a booklet. This simplifying as well what the regulations are trying to say. They're trying to boil it down then. Instead of somebody looking at the whole big act on the internet, if you were to print the USH Act, it's about maybe about this big anyway, right? But you can simply look at a pamphlet that have on it the duties of the employer. That is like an ACOP then. That will come like an ACOP for you understanding the act without looking at the full act. You are just looking at that particular document that tells you about what the act is saying. Think you understand the relationship between all of these? Each one is trying to explain the other one. So there's one more. The last one is something called guidance notes, right? So guidance notes, these are also booklets They contain practical advice from the health and safety executive, usually in the form of books. And those books, they are denoted by the letters HSG, right? Now, all of these, to let you know, the ACOPs, the guidances, all of these are free on the internet. If you were working somewhere, let me give you some examples. If you're working somewhere and you did not know like the average temperature the room's supposed to be at, you can simply just go to Google and put in HSG for temperature. And you'll see a booklet will come down and it will tell you like what is the guidance for temperature based on maybe the part of the world that you are in anyway. If you wanted to see it on the ACOPs, you have to do the same thing. You put ACOPs for temperature in Trinidad and Tobago, and you'll see that will download as well, or maybe this part of the world. But they are all booklets trying to break down or trying to explain what the law actually has in it anyway, right? I had one time a guy from the safety from courts. He left now. He left and he went across, I think, to Udicott. He wanted some advice on signage. They were putting signage throughout courts. And one of the signs they wanted him to put throughout courts was like a warning sign for people who were allergic to seafood, right? Apparently a worker or maybe a customer, somehow she made contact with something in the store. This was at the Freeport, the big Freeport store anyway. And they wanted some guidance like on where to put these signage and stuff. And I had them go just like that, just put HSG, guidance for signage, you know, and whatever have you, right? But what do you all think about that though? I mean, do you think it's reasonable for courts to put signage about allergies throughout the furniture store?
Yeah.
Well, that was it. Some people had said yes, some people had said no. But again, we don't have, Trinidad and Tobago doesn't have the specific guidances, so we had to go and search them out. It turned out though that it was not really feasible to put it throughout courts because, you know,
it would pose a risk.
Yeah, I think it have to do with the risk. So it probably would be more feasible to put those signage around the lunchroom, understand? Like around the welfare facility in courts now for the workers. But I don't think the average customer who is coming in would want to be aware of, you know, like seafood allergies. It turned out that way that the guidance did not say that we had to post it throughout the whole courts. Because case in point, you can go to courts today and you would not see those signs. But if you get into the lunch rooms, you'll find them there. If you get to the welfare facilities, you'll find those guidances there. So you understand the point behind it? The word is, it is a guidance. If you read the second line, it says, guidances itself has no legal standing. A guidance, this particular book, and just to show you a difference, right? This book that is called a guidance is not law, but the ACOP to the top here, this one was law. This particular book or this particular document, if you download it, if you search it out, this one is law. The ACOPs, they say, they are regarded as extensions of the law. So in a way, an ACOP is the law, right? The guidance booklet, though, this one is not the law. They say it has no legal standing but contains advice which mirrors best practice at the time of which the author would have written the book. Following the guidance alone does not guarantee safety at work and will not prevent issue or should not prevent issue of an enforcement notice. And that's really kind of weird. That would have meant it not following the guidance the way that you should anyway. I wanted to show you a picture of that. I may have one here. It's a picture of one of the books. This is the one straight from the internet. Right? So like, I mean, it may be a little bit difficult to read. It says thermal comfort in the place. So whatever you are faced with, and I can tell you really weird ones that students have actually brought up. If you're looking at maybe a guidance of welding, a guidance of sandblasting, a guidance of working at height. I had one time a worker wanted to know a guidance for the width of the parking stalls, right? So the width of the parking stalls, you know, so anything you want to find, the HSC has a publication on it, meaning that there is a book on it. You can simply just put HSG4 FOR, sorry, FOR, so HSG for welding, HSG for sandblasting, and it will come up for itself. Each one has a unique number. The one for temperature is HSG 194. What I wanted to show you though was that it is a book. It's a small book. I don't know you might see it. You're seeing the front page here, but it's not a very thick book. It's like a pamphlet. 10 pages for the most, 5 pages, 6 pages. And these though, you have to understand that these was going to help with the employer providing, from last week class, these books was going to help with the employer providing welfare facilities, but everything could not have been written in the HSW Act, nor in the OSH Act. So we have these supplementary books or supplementary documents that goes together with the law itself, right? I have an example here of one, well, not a picture, but an example of a content of what one really says. An example of one, or this is actually found in your book. I don't have my books with me, so I cannot find the exact line or remember it. Sometimes I do remember it, but at the moment I don't. It may be, to be honest with you, if you have the green book, page 16, if you have the two books, okay, page 17, if you have the green book, you see, okay, so my memory not that bad, right? So my memory not that bad, right? But for the other book, the NGC 1 book, I do not know where that is, but you can probably search a table of contents. If you see regulations, you're probably gonna have ACOPs and guidances, and they open it, and you probably will find the same example here. Anyway, what it is an example of a regulation being explained by an ACOP and being explained by a guidance. So it's a 3 in 1. It's each trying to explain the other one, right? So it starts here. Let me see if I can get the highlighter on this. It says regulation 7 of the workplace health, safety, and regulation shall be reasonable. Now, that is all you'll find in the regulation. All the regulation says that during working hours, the temperatures shall be reasonable, but it never went on to give the specifics as to what is reasonable. To get the specifics, we have to go to the supplement. 16 degrees, unless it is 18 degrees. Now, by the figures, you probably will guess that this is for England, right? And it is for England. Remember, we said we do not have Trinidad and Tobago. We do not have, so I cannot tell you then what is the regulations and temperature in Trinidad and Tobago, because we don't, right? Labor. She, because it's Ms. Jeffrey, she can write it in, but it has not been written there. So for Trinidad and Tobago, we do not have specific figures. So we have to look at where countries that do have specific figures. But what is reasonable Celsius? Unless much physical effort is needed, in which case it would have to be 13. And then the last but not least, the guidance, thermal comfort in the workplace, we tell the employer how to maintain that 16 degrees Celsius, right? So the last one will give like, you know, like maybe temperature settings on the AC in England and whatever have you, but it's going to be very hands-on in how you maintain the degrees in the workplace. And then all 3 of these, if you can see this, all 3 of these, all of what you just saw, the guidance, those are 3 documents that's going to fit right here in the welfare arrangements. The 3 of them is trying to break down what does this really mean? What does adequate welfare facilities mean? And if you look at it now, you see that adequate facilities in terms of temperature really mean 16 degrees Celsius, right? The specifics of it was not in the Act, was not in this HSW Act up here, the HASAWA. It wasn't in the regulations. You had to go to 16 degrees Celsius, right? So there is a question here. So we'll start with this now. The meaning and HSC, because the HSC has been folded up into the HSE approved codes of practice. So everybody have to know that in the same so this was the most popular question you have seen. Questions? I'm going to bring it down anyway. Right? I didn't get a sip of water, right? Think you're okay with it? You have to do a bit of pre-reading, post-reading to wait, right? I will try the video again on the YouTube channel, so have a second go at it, right? You have a basic understanding of what we covered today. As you know, we more or less did kind of more talk about statute law because all of these are legal proceedings that all the legal standing will go behind all of these. You mentioned common law a bit, we touched common law. That's what the slides went. The slides more or less focus on statute law, right? I don't have other questions or repeats, clarify, points of clarification. Good ones. Right, that's all that there. What I was going to say is that new course is not like this. For those like, I guess after a class like today, you could probably ask yourself, you know, I get myself, it seems a bit complicated. But the whole course is not like this. It is actually just a part of chapter 1, right? And for the next couple of it seem as if it is a lot of us, but right, in essence, after all of that, this may be and then again, your question, the most common question sometimes is what is the duty of the employer, right? We covered already in last week's class. So it's sounds a little complicated, but the part of chapter 1 is going to go back into normal and safety topics like risk assessments and accident investigation and JSAs and all every health and safety topics anyway. But this part of the syllabus is the heaviest, you know, in terms of the laws anyway. Any comments or questions?
Yes, in the homework, explain the meaning and the rules of what exactly you're asking for the legal status.
Right, so all it's saying for legal status is if it has legal standing or if it does not have legal standing. So that's all. You're simply saying health and safety regulation has legal status. That's all you're looking for. That's it. That's the answer there. Right? So you're simply saying that a regulation is the law, right? For the other one, if I could sell it out, I'm selling it out, right? So the other one you're saying the ACOPs is law, it has legal standing, right? The last one, though, if I can clarify, the last one does not have legal standing. It is not law, it is advice, right? Now, one of the reasons why it is advice, if I can go back to this slide with it, one of the reasons why guidances has no legal standing is because, just to be honest with you here, anybody can write it, right? I know they said it contains practical advice from the HSE, but the practical advice could come from anywhere. Think of this then, think of this as like a pamphlet produced by BP. You understand? Think of it as a pamphlet produced by, I'm not going to say OSHA because OSHA will be government, but think of it as a pamphlet produced by Petrotred, like a newsletter, right? A newsletter produced by Petrotred. And in it, they have some sort of guidance for workplace temperature, or they have some sort of advice for working at height, right? Think of it as a pamphlet, but it's not written by a government entity. It could be written by anybody. It could be written by Petrotrin. It could be written by Arrive, Alive. Those are not really government entities. It could be like stakeholders in the community. So for that reason, a guidance is just that. It contains practical advice, but it does not have to be written from a government. A good example of a guidance is the textbooks that you have. Right? A guidance is a book, but it's written by an author. Those of us who have the green book, the author I think is Phil Hughes and Ed Ferret. Those of us who have the other two books is written by two authors in RRC, right? Those books are not laws. A company doesn't have to follow the advice in those books, but if they follow the advice, it's good advice. The books are good books. They have good information in them, but they cannot then be fined, right? A company cannot be fined for not following the advice you find in a book, right? Especially a book written by an everyday author. And I say an everyday author because quite some of them are quite well known, but the thing is, the books are not written by the government. This last book, this last one here, this, if you could put back up this picture, this last one doesn't have to be written by the government. Could have been written by BP, could have been written by Heritage, whatever have you. So it contains the advice, but it would not have. So all you're looking for there, Kay, all you're looking for is just to say, with that last one, the HSC guidances has, you can see that it is good advice. It is a booklet produced by possibly a stakeholder, but it has no legal standing
Legal.
or no legal status. Right?
Okay.
So I did your homework there for you with that one. Right?
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure, right? Like I said, one of the good things with NIBOSH is that they repeat. I'm not too sure why. I have not come across anybody like them. You know, I mean, Kay knows me from UE. I taught in UE for a number of years, probably more than 5 years. I taught her just once anyway, just the end of a semester. But I've not worked in any place where they repeat straight questions, like dead-on questions. But NIBOSH has been doing that from year to year. They repeat questions wholesale then. Sometimes they do not change anything in it. It's the same questions from 2018, 2019, etc. So a good idea. I think I saw all the homework. I'm not too sure if Tiffon is on today, but I saw all the homework. I saw Reddy, Nathaniel, Kevin, right? And all the homework was good. So when you have them though, please keep them to study from them, right? Because you could never tell if your very own homework questions, some of which you may see in your final exam anyway, right? So I have spoken for more than an hour, right? Again, this was the nature of today's class. I had to finish all three to leave regulations alone and to pick up, you know, approved codes of practices next week. It would have been not fair because these three go together. Next week we have another three. You have another three, but that is an easy three: absolute duty, practicable, and reasonably practicable is a three. That three that goes into one as well. And then from there, we're gonna go into the Judge Judy kind of law. You see Judge Judy here, which is the one that Nathaniel mentioned. This is one in which that you only get compensation if you take it upon yourself to find a lawyer and take somebody to court. This is not going to be the state. It's not going to be initiated by the state, but it's going to be initiated by you, the employee, or by you, the person, anyway, right? Any closing questions, anyone? Okay, well, it's nice to see all of you and nice to have you all. Hopefully the hour was not too much of a stretch, right? But not all the classes will be this long. Some classes will come back to be the half an hour, you know, time frame anyway. This one we needed to kind of get this out of the way, right? So I wish you all the best, and we'll see again. Happy holidays for today as well. Today is actually a public holiday. I really did not realize that, right? So I'll see you all back next week, Saturday. Yes.
Okay, bye.
Okay, as soon as I find this stuff.